welcome back. I'm Ashley Summerfield, and we're here tonight for our second edition of the Student Voter Forum hosted by UFTV. Today we will continue our discussion on relevant political issues surrounding the upcoming presidential primary. With us tonight, we have Mac Williams, Brody Yingling, and Jake Miller. Brody, we're going to begin with you. Since you were here last week, a couple weeks ago actually, for our first voter forum, we're going to ask you, how has the media and the recent debates changed any viewpoints that you may have?
I haven't changed my stance on the issues. I've changed a little bit on who I'm supporting. I still really like Rubio, but the Republican sides, the Republican primary is wide open, and what we've seen with Trump is very interesting and concerning for some Republicans. So I'm a little bit more open to the other candidates other than Rubio now.
Great. And since we do have two new students with us today, we're going to get a little more acquainted. So Mac, we'll start with you. Just tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm a sophomore PR major here at the university. I've lived in Findlay my entire life, and I really love the community here.
Great. And Jake?
I'm a fifth-year senior, actually, studying PR as well. Hoping to move on to into a career recently, or I guess here soon in the future. From Mansfield, Ohio, so about an hour and 20 minutes or so east of here, in a community very similar to Findlay.
Great. Mac, we're going to start with you. What are some issues that you look for when thinking about who you're going to vote for in the upcoming primary?
Well, number one, for me, the biggest issue is gun control. We see throughout the year, it seems like every month we have one of these mass shootings, and it's got to stop. We have to find ways to limit these people from getting the automatic weapons, from getting these assault-style weapons that just wreak havoc on people. Common sense, it doesn't have to be big, but some common sense there. That's probably the biggest issue for me.
Great. And with that being said, what candidate are you leaning towards?
I'm leaning towards Hillary Clinton. I feel like her stance on gun control, as well as her stance on the economy, is really why I'm voting for her.
Great. And Jake, we'll go to you on the same question. When thinking about a candidate that you might be interested in voting for, what issues kind of really spark your interest?
I mean, I think Mac touched on a great one here is gun control, and specifically with mass shootings. That's really a hot button issue for both parties, I think, and for good reason. But I don't think that's the only one that I would talk about. I would talk about job creation, minimum wage potentially, and especially foreign policy, which I think goes hand in hand with gun control as a political issue. They're a lot of the same. I guess it's two different sides of the same coin, in my opinion. So I think those are the ones that I would focus on mostly.
Great. And I know you're kind of like an independent voter. But is there a candidate that you're leaning toward voting in the primary?
I'm definitely leaning Republican. I don't even want to start right now to decide which candidate I would support. And I think that just looking at last week in the debates that we had from the beginning of this election season, all of the different information that's come out, it's insane how much new information is coming out every single week. And I would never want to try to make an estimated guess about who's the right candidate for me until I've actually, March 15th is going to be the day that I decide probably. So I'm not going to put my stock in one candidate at this point.
What needs to happen, either in the media, debates, etc., to kind of solidify or help you decide what candidate you need?
Well, I mean, this for me is one of the big picking points that I have for media itself is that the debate is not the Super Bowl. I saw an ad on the internet the other day for the Republican debate, and I mean it looked like an ad for the Super Bowl, and they're hyping it up and portraying it as this big media event that's going to get huge ratings and make that media corporation massively successful. But at the end of the day, is that actually what's important to the American people? And I really don't think that it is. So for me, a lot of it, though the debates do weigh into it, political advertising also plays into it, and political history, the history of each candidate plays into it, as well as probably a lot of research that I would do on my own through different internet sites and things like that.
Great. Mac, we're going to go back to you, and then Brody, I'll come to you. Are you dead set on Hillary Clinton, or is there anything that could happen that could kind of change your mind before next Tuesday?
I wouldn't say that I'm dead set, but I'm very close.
Okay.
Bernie, he has some great ideas, but how are you going to pay for it? How are you going to make college free? You can't just tax the rich, as the Democrats often like to say. Tax the rich, always going to make everything better.
You sure you're a Democrat?
Right. It's not a popular sentiment in the party, but it's true. I think that definitely plays into it. I think that Bill Gates and Warren Buffett definitely need to pay their fair share. But obviously those people aren't going to be able to fund the whole thing. So how are you going to pay for things? And that's really where he's fallen short with me. So.
Great. Brody, I know you're kind of maybe changing your mind a little bit about what candidate you might vote for next Tuesday. What needs to happen for you to kind of make that last final decision?
Well, despite what's kind of seen as the popular tide of some of the primaries so far, Trump's not the Republican nominee. There are a lot of Republicans that are against him. I don't personally care for him. I don't think he's an idiot, but I don't like his approach to addressing the issues, and I don't really think he has addressed the issues. I really like Marco Rubio, and that's who I would be prone to vote for. However, I like Ohio's Governor John Kasich. I think he truly is the only principled, reasonable adult in the room that's actually addressing the issues, and I think he's the only one that's serious about doing the job of president, not just running for it and being, a figure in the spotlight in the meantime.
Kind of going off of that, I know a lot of people have that opinion about Kasich, that he is like the adult in the room. He is taking a more mature approach to the debates. Why do you think that he's not kind of gaining the support that other candidates are?
Well, Americans don't like the dull, policy-focused answers. They like the 140-character tweets. They like the reality TV shows and stars. They don't focus on the substance. They focus on the glamour and the dazzle. And Trump has brought that to the race. He's said incendiary comments that have gotten a lot of attention, good or bad. It's brought up issues that we might not otherwise be discussing, but it's not the same approach that I would be taking if I was running, if I was old enough and I was running. So,
I think I would add to that and say that if you look back at ancient Rome, they had the Colosseum, where it was the antics that sold people and brought people to the Colosseum. Right now, the media is the Colosseum, and the politicians in these debates are the gladiators. And what ultimately happened after the rise of the Colosseum was the demise of Rome. And that's very scary to me, and that's why I think this election is extremely pivotal in American society.
Great. We're going to get started on kind of talking about some of the hot button issues and what the candidates are mainly discussing. How do you feel that job creation is playing a role into this year's campaign? Jake, we're going to start with you.
Well, I think obviously, and this was actually brought up in the Hancock County voter forum that was done earlier this evening, but what president would not want to create jobs? You need a workforce in order to have a strong country. So job creation has to be in every single presidential candidate's plans somewhere along the lines. But there again, that's as a president, what actually can you do in a free market economy to start jobs? You've got to have people who are motivated and driven to start businesses and to go out and find jobs that need to be done. There's whole markets out there that haven't even been touched that someone else is doing right now and spreading themselves too thin. So I think the goal of a presidential candidate, in my opinion, in order to start creating jobs is to bring the American people to innovation and to new ideas and to motivation, actually, to push them to want to work and start jobs and create businesses and be the innovative country that we were, that actually brought us to the great successes that we've had so far.
Great. And do you think there is a candidate right now that's kind of showing more of a drive for job creation, in your opinion?
In my opinion, what I've seen so far, I don't think that there's one who is solely focused on job creation. Everybody touches on it a little bit, but it doesn't seem to be, you've got Trump with border control and a lot of things that he's talking about, the new issues with his gun control, Bernie Sanders with college education and its availability for everybody. But at the end of the day, I don't think those help create jobs. So nobody's really running on a job creation platform, in my opinion.
Great. Brody, how do you feel that job creation is playing?
I would like all the candidates to talk more about the issues. There's not one party that ignores the issue of job creation, but both approach it from a different standpoint. For me personally, I would like to see the candidates focus more on it, and I think the American people would really like to hear more solutions for how do we, bring about job creation, how do we create more jobs. I mean, there are jobs being created, but it's not at a fast enough pace that's going to satisfy the workforce. And I mean, we have employment rates going down, but that does not measure the workers that have given up or they're underemployed. And there's really a lot below the radar in terms of what we see with those numbers. So job creation needs to be focused on more.
Great. And same question for you, is there a candidate that you kind of think is talking about it more, or?
I mean, for me personally, I think the Republican side focuses on it from a more favorable standpoint. It's, the minimum wage, that is an issue with a lot of people. It is hard to raise a family on a low wage, but a lot of those jobs are supposed to be temporary. It's not supposed to be a lifelong career. And you have other jobs. We have an education shortage. We don't have workers trained for some of the right jobs. We don't have, some of the higher end visas are for more highly educated citizens of other countries that we don't have amongst our population to fill these jobs and roles. So it's job creation as an overall arching issue has a lot of minor segments to that, to the solution that the candidates could go more in depth on in policy.
Mike, did you have anything you wanted to add touching on job creation?
Well, when we talk about job creation, especially when we say underemployed, you have all of the job creation that's happening right now are jobs that are $11, $12 an hour. And like you said, it's very hard to raise a family or sustain yourself on $11 and $12 an hour. So I think we really need to be focused on creating jobs that are more beneficial to people and more long-lasting, rather than creating jobs, say, at Walmart or some of these other corporations that don't pay as much. So that's really where I'm at.
And what candidate, I know you're considering voting Democrat, what candidate on the Democratic side do you think is showing more of a drive for job creation?
Honestly, neither one. And that goes for both parties. I think that we as a people have been focused on the one-liners, especially from Mr. Trump. What are we going to hear? Who's going to make the headline? I think that's been the focus of debates. And I think that really needs to change. We need to have more substance instead of just talk. Like Mr. Trump says, and he's partially correct on this. That's a touchy subject. But politicians are all talk. We've seen it for 40, 50, 60 years. They're all talk and they're no action, which is why Mr. Trump's getting a lot of support. But that's really where I'm at.
Great. We're going to go on to another issue. We're just going to touch on this briefly. I know college lending has been kind of some talk within the debates. Is there anything you've heard that's kind of like sparked your interest, Jake, or any candidate that kind of stands out?
Well, I think, and this is my own understanding of it all, but I don't think that it's feasible right now to create free college education. There's too many variables in order to try to enact a policy like that. And while, yes, it sounds terrific, free college education, that's awesome. But at the end of the day, somebody somewhere is going to be paying for that. And eventually it's going to be you paying for, via tax dollars, other kids' college educations for the rest of your life. And that's something that is very difficult, I think, to try to tackle. What I think where we're at right now is that college tuition is constantly increasing every year. We see it here at the University of Findlay. It's like a 2.6% increase or something like that. And tuition is high, but you also have loans that you can take out, scholarships you can earn if you're a well-rounded individual. But by the same token, where our generation has been pushed to go to college, we now have openings, and this was also touched on in the county forum, openings in the lower skill level trades. So where our generation was pushed to go to college, and the generation or two before us might not have been, they filled those roles that are now being vacated. So I think it's unrealistic to think that two, 3 generations down the road are also going to be forced to go to college. We're going to need people to replace those electricians and to do those skilled trade jobs. And when that happens, college tuition is going to have to go down. It's just a natural trend, I think, that's going to have to take place, because nobody's going to want to go to school or be able to go to school at $60,000 a year, regardless of what the scholarships are. And when that happens, students are going to want to go to those trade skilled job positions because they can make good money at it and not have to pay out the butt, frankly, for education. And at that point, college tuition is going to have to go back down, and then the trend reverses. So that's where I foresee things going, and that's not necessarily through any political candidate's perspective.
Brody, did you have anything you kind of wanted to add off of that?
Definitely what you touched on with the interest rate and with college going up every year. Tuition rates are increasing in a lot of institutions at a faster rate than inflation. And if the money you're paying for a piece of paper that says you're qualified for something is becoming more and more expensive than what the dollar's worth or what those jobs are getting paid, it's a conundrum, quite frankly, for college students. And like Jake said, there are a lot of jobs that there's a shortage of, like I touched on earlier, underemployment in some of these fields, that we are going to need electricians, we're going to need plumbers, we're going to need carpenters. These are skilled trades. These aren't something you just pick up a hammer or a plunger and do one day. And a college degree doesn't necessitate, that you can do anything. I don't want to build a house, and no one here would want me to build their house. We need people that can build houses. And we need to look at does everyone need to go to college? There are plenty of great degrees, but there are also plenty of great jobs where you can go to vocational training and get the certificates to perform those jobs. And they're great jobs, but people overlook them because of the push for college degrees.
I think I would add to that and say that, especially through my own experience working in concrete construction, I've made more money doing concrete construction than I've made in any other part-time job that I've ever had. And I know gentlemen who worked in concrete construction were making $36 an hour. That's an outrageous wage. That's good money. Yes, it's hard work, but you're getting paid for it. So what I think I would say, the analogy is that you can have all the engineers in the world, but if you've got nobody to put those plans in motion, you're not going to have a societal structure and an infrastructure. So yes, you need engineers, but you also need the people to carry out that labor. I think that's where the disparity is right now. We've got more engineers than we have people doing that labor.
Mac, what's your stance on the college lending issue?
I think it's a big issue. I think it's something that we're definitely going to have to look at. But as Jake mentioned and you mentioned, not everybody's cut out for college. Not everybody needs to go to college. We need more welders in this country than we do philosophers. I'm sorry, but it's the truth. You have to have people to build office buildings for these people coming out of college to work in, right? So I think it takes common sense. So.
Great. We're going to take a short 2-minute commercial break, and we'll be right back to discuss more of the hot button issues approaching the presidential primary next Tuesday.
There's one thing you can never have sex without.
It's not something you buy.
Or something you take.
In fact, there's only one way to get it.
It has to be given to you, freely.
It's consent.
Because sex without it isn't sex.
It's rape. Consent.
If you don't get it, you don't get it. It's on us to stop sexual assault.
Learn how and take the pledge at itsonus.org.
Hey, look, it's those guys. Are you good to drive?
I'm fine.
How many did you have?
I should be fine.
You should be.
Go and step out of the vehicle for me.
See ya, buddy. Good luck.
So turns out, buzz driving and drunk driving, they're the same thing. And it costs around $10,000. So not worth it.
It takes less than 1 minute to find out if you may have prediabetes. You can do it here. But you probably won't. You're busy. Kids, work, show coming back in 48 seconds. So let's do this now. Hold up one finger if you're a man, women, 0. 3 more fingers if you're over 60, 2 over 50, 1 over 40. If you're not sure, keep in mind you're sitting on a couch right now, so 1 more finger if you're not very active. 1 finger if yes, 0 if no. 1 yes, 0 no. Next, find the body type that looks most like you and hold up that many fingers while I look around awkwardly. And that's it. If you're holding up 5 fingers or more, you probably have prediabetes. Sorry to be so blunt, but hey, you're busy. Just go to the site.
BioLogistics is proud to support UFTV and the Findlay Media Network. Watch Oiler basketball live on uftv.findlay.edu.
Welcome back. Thanks for joining us again. We're going to start off by kind of touching on an issue that's been pretty bold in this campaign. We're going to talk about the issue of immigration. So, Jake, we're going to start with you.
What specifically about immigration are you trying to get at here? Just so we don't cover the whole broad topic
right.
at once, because we all know it's a
huge topic.
Huge. We're going to touch on kind of the idea of like the deportation and the border control. So, do you have any viewpoints or opinions on that?
I mean, I think for me personally, where I'm sitting right now, looking at this election season, you're either one way or the other, I feel like. And people are trying to talk about what they're going to do to change immigration and not necessarily looking at what immigration policies are out there right now. How can you change something if you don't know what it is at its foundation? So that's where I would want to go. I would want candidates to look at that and shed more light on that, because who's to say that our immigration policies right now aren't okay? But nobody's talking about that because on both sides of the table, people think that change is what the American public wants as far as immigration is concerned. And that's why we have Donald Trump building the wall. And that's why we have people talking about deportation and then again, on the opposite side, housing as many refugees as you can. But logistically, what are the optics of that as a policy? And how are you going to get those things done? It's a lot to say something, but after talking the talk, let's walk the walk and show me actually how you're going to do this. And that's where I stand on immigration right now. So yes, it is a hot button issue, and it's important to all of us, I think. But it needs to be more important in the candidates' eyes as to how they're going to get what they're talking about actually accomplished.
Brody, what are your viewpoints on that?
I think immigration in and of itself is not an issue. This is a nation that's been founded on immigration since its founding and even before then, since the Native Americans, first Americans, came to North and South America. You can't find an American today that does not have a background of another nationality. You can't. There's no natural Americans per se. People are upset about illegal immigration because these are people here under the radar, and 99.9% of them are not here to commit crimes. You have some that are committing crimes, and because of their legal status, they are under the radar, and there's no way of knowing who they are or where they are. It's that and the fact that they cut in line that I think peeves a lot of Americans, and I welcome them, but I want them to come here legally. My approach to the policy would be to identify them. We're not going to shove a million people into vans and drive them across the border. We need to identify them, put them at the back of the line, at the back, not ahead of the people that have waited and paid their fees. Have them pay the back taxes, the back fees, and wait their turn, and then give them a legal status. And with that, you'll know who these people are. You won't have to worry about who, is working over there, whether they have malintent or not. And it becomes a national security issue. We need to know who these people are. immigration to me is first and foremost a national security issue. Immigration's fine, but we need to know who's coming in our borders and why they're here.
What are your viewpoints on kind of the border control issue? How do you think that plays a role in what candidate you're?
I think the border control is understaffed. We're looking at thousands of miles of border, and I don't have the figure of how many actual border security guards we have, but it's obviously not enough, and that's just on the top of the border. They have found tunnels that go miles and miles under the border that we aren't finding until years after they've been used, and that's funneling thousands, if not maybe even more, aliens into our country. So it's not a one-sided issue in terms of a solution. Security, determining how we approach 11 million people in this country, those are the two big issues, and both sides approach it from a different way. So I think we have to look at both issues and have a combined solution to determine what the best option is.
Great. Mac, what are your viewpoints on the immigration issue?
Well, I have a little bit different viewpoint. First of all, we have approximately 11 million people here illegally. The rhetoric we hear from the right is, quite frankly, disturbing. The fact that we would round up 11 million people and ship them across the border is ridiculous. It takes too much time, it takes too much effort, and it's not feasible. Secondly, the people that are here, we need to have a pathway to citizenship. People that take 5, 6, 7 years longer to gain legal status is not what our values are. We don't say, come in, and then wait. That's not what we do. So that's really, for me, where I'm at on immigration. Also, we've seen the effects of it here in Findlay with the heroin epidemic. A lot of these drugs flow over the southern border. I do agree that we need to strengthen our border, but like you said, these drug tunnels, they're killing us, man. We've got heroin, it's rampant. Not just here in Findlay, but all over this country.
Great. We're going to kind of move on from the immigration issue and talk about something that I know is a really big issue for all of you. We're going to talk about gun control a little bit. So, Mac, we're going to start with you on that one.
Well, and I think it's been highlighted by all of these mass shootings we've seen. We see it every month, practically. Somebody goes into a school, whether it be a first grade classroom in Sandy Hook, or random, like in Michigan, just a couple of weeks ago. It's nonsense. And the availability of assault weapons in the United States of America is astounding. The fact that I can go out and buy an AR-15 and be comparable with the local police department is scary. And I think we need, the rhetoric that comes from the right is, it's a right. And yes, it is a right. But the Supreme Court also ruled that it's not set in stone. It's not one way. There are limitations that can be had. And I think it's common sense that we need. To say that we want to take away guns is just not reasonable. It's not feasible. So the argument that comes from the right is, the Democrats want to take away our guns. Let's rile up so they can't take our guns. I don't think we're trying to take your guns. I think that we just want common sense reform that makes it harder for a criminal to go in, buy an AR-15, and then go in and shoot up a school. I think that's really where our party's at.
And is there a candidate you feel out of the two that is kind of talking more about it and kind of sparking your interest in that?
I think Hillary Clinton has definitely talked about it. She supports a ban on assault weapons, as do I. I think it's just astonishing. And the people that say, we need to be able to hunt and for sport, that's fine. You can hunt and for sport all you want with a shotgun or a pistol or a hunting rifle. But you don't need automatic weapons and you don't need AR-15s that have 30 rounds in a magazine where you can just blast it well. So I definitely think that she has been the strongest on that.
Brody, what are your opinions and thoughts on the gun control
well,
issue?
like we touched on last time, I'm pro-gun. There are the rights in the Bill of Rights are there. There's not. They're not weak. The founders did not put the Bill of Rights to be weak. There are limitations to it, just like with whether it be the First Amendment, with the Second Amendment. You go down the line. There's limitations in all cases. I am just as concerned as any other American, if not even more so, by the mass shootings. I am a gun owner. I know the power of some of these weapons, but I'm more concerned by the mental health aspect of it. And I don't think that either party is addressing it like they should. I don't agree with the terminology of some of the bills we've seen in some of the states, Connecticut, California, to ban certain types of weapons because it focuses on furniture of the weapon instead of the function of the weapon. Most of the mass shootings are happening with pistols. They're not happening with AR-15s. In very few of the cases are they actually happening with AR-15s. There are rifles that are much more powerful than AR-15s out there. And I'm pro-gun. I own at least one AR-15. I think they're great rifles. I don't own that to go out and commit atrocities. I own that as a defensive weapon. And a lot of these individuals, as we've determined who these shooters are, we've determined that they didn't get their weapons legally. They either got them from someone else, which in turn committed a crime, or they had a mental health issue that was never identified or treated. And I think you bring more punishments for these people that are illegally, for example, the Sandy Hook shooter, he killed his mom and then took the gun. He was not a gun owner. He did not legally get the gun. So there wasn't a loophole there. He murdered his mom and then took the weapon. So there's different approaches to it, and I think we're ignoring some of the fundamental or the foundational aspects of the issue as a whole.
I know the mental health aspect of gun control is really big for you. Have you heard any of candidates on the Republican side touch on that at all?
Not as presidential candidates, no. I know Senator John Cornyn was looking. Actually, I believe he had either a bill or an amendment to a bill that shifted funding to mental health. And I think that does more than some of these bills that we've seen come forward. There's already national background checks. Those don't prevent atrocities per se. A lot of these people, like I said, going back to the Sandy Hook shooter, his mom had a background check. He did not because he was not the gun owner. He took it from his mom. And some of the other aspects of the gun issue, they're not enforcing current laws we have. There are a lot of laws that are on the books that the police aren't even aware of. They're not enforcing them. So how do we throwing more laws at the problem is not going to solve it per se. We need to take these criminals and charge them more harshly.
Jake, what's your standpoint on the whole gun control issue?
Well, I'm going to start by saying that I think Mac hit the nail on the head by saying that Democrats don't necessarily want to take our guns away. I think that's a common misconception. I think it would be literally impossible to take guns away from the American people. I myself am an avid hunter, fisherman, outdoorsman, own plenty of guns, have the CCW. So I myself would not give my gun up if it came down to it. But I think what is happening is that politically, gun control becomes a singular issue, and it actually pulls in a bunch of different elements. We can talk about immigration, not of humans, but of non-native species. Feral hogs, for instance, are wreaking havoc in the South, killing croplands because they tear up everything to create these walls that they roll in. They're not native to the Americas. The AR-15 and assault rifles that are automatic are oftentimes the favorite weapon of choice for people to hunt and kill those to help grow crops and therefore strengthen the economy by producing food for the American people and for the rest of the world. And that is because they offer you the highest opportunity to kill that animal and to get rid of it as an invasive, problematic species. At the same time, though, I think that you can pull job creation into this as well. And yes, we do background checks on people who buy guns. And there are laws in place, like Brody has mentioned, that aren't necessarily enforced. So piling laws on top of laws just makes the whole system more complex. And oftentimes muddies the waters and makes it less available for people to navigate. But what I would say is that if you go out and buy a gun, why should you not, as a hunter, I've had to go through a day-long class. This was 12 hours of a class where I learned how to properly handle and maneuver a weapon, where we learned safety precautions and procedures, and I was taught what a gun was as a lethal weapon. why can't we do that and create jobs for people who don't necessarily have to go to college, but have a skilled trade on how to teach someone how to use a gun to then teach the potential gun owners. I think that's one thing that could be hugely popular on the gun control issue, and nobody's talking about it. But at the same time, I don't think that gun control itself it can be an issue that a presidential candidate can run on, because it is so complex. So that's kind of where I stand on it, is that gun control itself is not an issue. I think you have to pull in a bunch of different elements. And the other piece to that is it just like with illegal drugs, people still find a way to get them. If you ban assault rifles or put a ban on or restrictions on certain weapons, if people want them, they're still going to get them one way or another. So I don't think that those kinds of regulations and restrictions are going to be beneficial to the American populace. I think that the people who are going to want to commit those crimes are going to find a way to do it regardless. So you might as well arm and empower the American people to prevent it.
One thing I want to add here, when we discuss mental health, I find it interesting that we don't that we learn about these people after they've done these horrific things. I haven't seen yet where we've stopped somebody from doing one of these things because we've recognized that they're crazy. Yes, I think you're both right. I think we need to put more time and energy into mental health. But I think it's also hard to identify somebody who's in their mom's basement becoming radicalized and doing all these crazy things. I think it's very hard to identify that. So saying that mental health is a better solution, I would tend to disagree with, because it's very hard to identify. And most of the time we identify it post-mortem, after these people have done these horrific things. So,
I mean, yeah, I think you're right on that too. I think there's definitely a stigma with mental health in the United States. People don't want to come forward if they have depression or other mental conditions that might be may cause people to look at them differently in society. But it's something that we're going to have to do. I mean, we're going to have to suck it up and know that this is better than letting someone go and treat. And it doesn't necessitate mass murder. Addressing mental health is an issue that goes far beyond guns. It betters someone's life to get these problems treated, whether through counseling, whether through medication. And the medication, it's not drugging someone, it's fixing an imbalance in their brain. And it's not something they did necessarily on their own or to their own fault. Some people are just born with it. And it's, we see it. It's a tragedy, We look at a lot of these, people are villains. And they did something horrendously evil. They, slaughtered human life. And I think there's no excuse for that on that level. But it's something we're going to have to, suck up and address if any side is going to really address these mass murders.
Absolutely, and that could be an opportunity for job growth. I mean, you're going to need counselors, you're going to need psychiatrists, you're going to need all these things. So that's another area where we could grow in jobs as well.
And the other thing that I would add to that is, from what I've talked about, is if you do create the policy for training of every person who purchases a gun on how to handle that weapon properly, they're also going to know how to store it properly, which then could have led to the prevention of someone like a Sandy Hook shooter who took the gun from his mom, who likely just had it in her purse. So if you educate those people, I think that's going to be highly beneficial. But to that same point, there was actually just a study released not too long ago out of Texas, where they took 8 children, I believe they were 6 years old and younger. Boys and girls, didn't matter. 2 of them came from households where the parents owned guns, and the rest of them did not. And they put these kids in a room with a bunch of toys. And the parents were behind a single viewing glass window to oversee the play of these children, how they interacted. I mean, it was a psychological experiment to figure out what these kids did as interaction. And I think it took within 15 seconds of the experiment starting for one of the children to go over and find, it was an actual pistol that had been disassembled, the fire mechanism had been taken out, there was no ammunition in it. But But that was the toy they gravitated to first. And there's video of these kids pointing it at the other kids, pretending to shoot them. Parents in the background saying, "Oh my gosh, my daughter's trying to shoot this kid," or "My son's shooting her." Well, what they actually found out is that 2 kids didn't touch the gun, and they were the 2 kids whose parents owned guns and had taught those kids at that young age how lethal a weapon actually was, and that it's not a toy. It's something not to be taken lightly. So of those 8 kids, there were only 2 of them that actually knew what was going on. It was from education. That's where I would try to tackle the gun issue and the mass shooting issues from an education standpoint.
I want to jump on to the comment that you just made about education of children by parents, and I think education is a valuable tool in gun control. And going back to a couple comments that were made too, the average American has had some exposure to a gun at some point, whether it be, going to the range with their parents or their siblings, or TV, or going hunting. However, a lot of politicians like to sling the word automatic out there. These mass murders are not being produced with machine guns like what popular opinion might perceive. These are semi-automatic weapons. It fires when you pull the trigger. It's not some Rambo movie where you pull the trigger and wipe out, a village or something like that. It's not a machine gun. So using the word assault weapon, using the word automatic, it's a fear associated word that is terrifying people. And a lot of these people that are being terrified aren't educated on guns. And these aren't kids being uneducated on, they're adults that are, the black furniture with the banana style magazine, or simply saying automatic, it terrifies them and they think it's something different than what it is. So that plays into the fear and plays into the politics of it. And a lot of the candidates are playing that game, unfortunately, instead of addressing, you and I might not agree on it, but I thought you've done a very good job on using language that was, appropriate. Mm-hmm. So I want to commend you on that versus the politicians.
No, yeah, I would actually tend to disagree here. Shocking. But when you say assault weapon, Columbine was used with assault weapons. San Bernardino was used with an assault weapon. Some of these killings are being used with assault weapons. I think it's it's a necessity that we have to look at these weapons and say, okay, there's a linkage here. How do we stop this? Again, you have San Bernardino, you have Columbine, you have Sandy Hook. All of these mass killings were committed with a rifle of some type. Or in Columbine's case, it was a submachine gun. So I think and you're right, not every, like Kalamazoo, that was not committed with a rifle. But I think the mass majority, you can see a linkage here between rifles and a mass killing. So I think we definitely need to pay attention to that.
One thing that I would add, again, and I think you both touched on a little bit, is rhetoric and how rhetoric works within a political campaign for both parties. And I think that we have to look at the root of assault rifle. In itself, the manufacturers aren't calling them assault rifles. It's a rifle that happens to shoot semi-auto or automatic. The word assault came about from somewhere within, likely, the media. So now we have a term that's now linking that gun to criminal activity. And I would say that, yes, those crimes are grievous and should not be promoted at all. They're terrible acts against human life. But to use the word assault only makes that seem more dramatic. And not to downplay any of those things at all. But I think that it's far easier for people to find drastic actions appropriate if you use rhetoric that makes those acts seem more dramatic.
And I think what we've seen with our nation in the last decade, at least, when we legislate out of fear, the American people lose. We see that with all issues. When the politicians hurriedly legislate or take action, it doesn't benefit the American people. It benefits the sensationalism that we see in the media, and that's all it calms. It does not create real solutions.
I would agree, and I think you're seeing that in large part with Mr. Trump. People
I agree.
People don't really realize okay, yeah, he can say whatever he wants, but there's two houses of Congress that have a lot to say as well. And you've definitely seen that over the last 8 years. I think the House and the Senate have voted 62 times or something like that to repeal Obamacare. After the 60th time, you would have thought they would have quit. But, you know, it is what it is. But you see the fear that Trump brings up in people, and they say, okay, yeah, let's go with that. We need to build this wall. Okay, yeah, that sounds good. But you have 2 houses of Congress that need to fund it. So I think that's what people need to keep in mind.
Yeah, and the gun control issue is something that we can go on and on talking about. There's never enough that can be said. Fortunately, we will have to wrap up for the evening, but I do want to thank you guys for participating. It's been really great to hear different viewpoints. As we wrap up, I'd like to thank you guys again. I'd also like to thank UFTV for hosting tonight. I hope that this has helped you kind of solidify your decisions before voting in next Tuesday's primary, March 15th. So thanks again to the students and UFTV. I'm Ashley Summerfield. Have a great night.